We admit it, we all listen into a conversation if we can do it subtly enough. Some of the most interesting ones are those that you shouldn't listen into, which is why our ears always perk up when we accidentally overhear two police officers talking. There's probably a reason why they're speaking quietly, but today, we're here to ruin some of the fun and let you in on some of their secrets. Are you ready to hear 10 secrets that police officers don't want you to know? You don't have to put your hands up where we can see them in order to watch this video, but we do have another request. Before we start, click on the subscribe button so we can ensure you're not missing out on our great videos. Secret numerical codes. You might have been simply walking down the street when you heard a local officer start shouting into his walkie-talkie. Listening closely, you curiously wonder what's happened. Is the problem as simple as somebody dropping litter? Or is the world about to end? Most of the time, you'll probably draw a blank and be left puzzled as to what you've just heard. This is intentional and is done for a number of reasons. All police forces tend to speak in different codes, for the sake of ease and to keep things private. You've probably heard of the universal alphabet that police forces use, starting with Alpha, Beta, Charlie. We won't bore you with the rest, but they have some other codes you might not be so familiar with. A lot of these are numerical. For a start, most of the problems that the police come across happen regularly, so instead of reeling off a version of the same story, they simply give the relevant code. A good example of this is the code 1066, which is used for reporting a suspicious person nearby. Instead of an officer describing a weird expression, strange dress sense, or unique facial hair, he can just use the code to get the fact of the matter solved straight away. Some others are 1053 for man down, 207 for kidnapping, and 510 for racing vehicles. You can be too smart. We've all heard about the numerous tests that prospective police officers must pass first before being allowed to keep the country under order. But did you know that a good score might not get you through? That's right, in order to become an officer, being too smart might actually work against you. And there's a good reason why. Sure, it's important for a good cop to be able to reel off any number of law enforcement facts, and it's pretty handy to have quick reactions and a lightning speed thought process. However, even if a trainee cop passes all of these tests with a 100% pass rate, their IQ number could make all the difference as to whether or not they succeed. It turns out that officers who are too intelligent aren't always hired, for fear that they'll get bored on the job. Whether this is due to their supervisor thinking they won't give the task their entire concentration, or simply that they'd quit after a few tiresome months, we've heard of a few good cases where officers haven't been hired on this basis. Of course, this isn't to say that police officers aren't intelligent, and we're slightly in awe of the vast amount of legal knowledge they're aware of. Cartoon punishment. Police forces across the world all have different ways of making sure their officers stay toe to the line, but in Thailand they have a rather strange method of doing so. If you visited the country before and interacted with a police officer, you might have been surprised by what you saw. It's rare, but some officers might be walking around with a Hello Kitty armband on. This isn't just down to personal fashion sense, although we know our favorite cartoon cat is always popular in the country. In fact, the armband is given to officers who are caught misbehaving. Obviously, if they're caught doing something really bad, they're punished appropriately. But for small matters like showing up late or dropping litter, it seems like an appropriate reaction. You might be wondering by now where the idea came from, and whether the Thai police are also fond of other cartoon characters, or if they just stay loyal to Hello Kitty. The reason behind the unique punishment is more for embarrassment than anything else. Hello Kitty is seen as a small child's icon, which doesn't particularly match up with the fearless nature of a police officer. Regardless, it seems to be working, much to the delight of the top dogs in the police force and the citizens of Thailand. The Viking Squad. Crime levels vary all over the world, and it's a well-known fact that some countries are safer than others. And one at the top of the safest countries is Iceland. The country is so safe that people don't even think twice about getting into cars with strangers, or leaving babies in proms unattended while they quickly run into the store. As such, the police force follows suit and are pretty much entirely unarmed. Almost 1 in 3 people who live in Iceland own a firearm, but police officers see no reason to do the same. The level of crime of this type is one of the lowest in the world, despite the amount of people who keep a firearm tucked away at home. It doesn't seem to cross their minds to use it, and in a place so safe, why would you need to? So, unlike much of the developed world, the police in Iceland rarely carry firearms, except for one branch called the Viking Squad. These are the guys you'd call in for a full-blown emergency. But unsurprisingly, they're rarely called out. We imagine that many of them either work in other branches of the police force or have another job on the side, because it seems the Viking Squad are there more for a silent threat than anything else. Officer Teddy Bear reporting for duty. Dutch police officers come well equipped with possibly everything you could need in an emergency. They'll reassure you, talk you through what will happen next, and hopefully they'll save the day. But they also have a special advantage over many police forces around the world, in that they're especially useful if something happens to a child. For example, If you're unfortunate enough to be caught up in a car crash, you'll probably focus straight away on the car. Once everyone is outside and safe, the next thought will be calling your insurance company and getting your car back into a fit driving state. It's more frustrating than anything, but small children feel the effects of this situation more than adults and need some further comforting as a result. So, in this situation, instead of just giving a small child a cuddle and walking off to solve important matters, the Dutch police force will bring out a trauma teddy. This small bear is used to comfort the child while its parents are busy sorting out the problem at hand. It's not something that's widely publicized outside of the country, and at the moment, the trauma teddy is only given to children under the age of 6, but we're sure you could ask for one too if you really needed it. The hidden ticket quota. If you've ever been pulled over for speeding or received a parking ticket, you'll know the frustration behind it. Why did there have to be an officer there right now? Surely you weren't going that quickly, right? Well, whereas back in the olden days you'd hear stories of citizens talking their way out of a ticket, you won't hear the same thing anytime soon. Because it turns out that officers are actually on the lookout for people speeding or not quite following the rules of the law. These officers aren't jobs worse, except that now, in some states, their job can actually depend on how many people they successfully pull over. For example, police in Atlanta, Georgia, were encouraged to spend more time dealing with tickets in court so more money could be made. Similarly, police in England were told to fine more people in order to fund road tax losses. One pilot study in London found that despite the local force being reduced by 4%, the amount of arrests made in connection with minor fines had actually risen by 44%. We all know we should behave and we understand the result if we don't, but it does seem a little sketchy for figures to have risen quite so much if it was simply down to many more people speeding. The Blue Code of Silence. This particular secret is something that we imagine goes on in pretty much every profession, but for some reason it has a special name in the police force. The Blue Code of Silence is the overarching term for covering up a fellow policeman's mistake so that he doesn't get into trouble. Obviously, if an officer does anything seriously wrong, we like to think that someone will step in and correct them. So the Blue Code of Silence is more for slight misdemeanors. We're talking things like showing up late to a shift, having an ever so slightly scruffy uniform, or other unimportant yet standard practices. No one is truly sure just how far up the Blue Code of Silence exists and whether or not all police officers are aware of it. Some have denied that it exists completely, but a study of the International Association of Police Chiefs found that over 80% of police officers claimed they'd heard of the code. That's not to say that this many actually use the code, but it seems you'd have to turn a fairly blind eye in order to stay oblivious. Attempts have been made to crack down on the code and to improve transparency throughout the police system, but until it's noted officially, we don't think it'll stop. Catching you out bird's eye style. There are some offenses that you can be pretty sure you won't be caught out for. For example, using a mobile phone when driving. Some people simply look around, check there's no police car nearby, and pull out their phone in order to make a phone call. In some countries, it's just frowned upon, but in many others, it's 100% illegal. It's been the cause for a lot of accidents in England, so police decided to crack down on those talking on the phone and driving at the same time. But they weren't sure how to do this subtly. Police cars are easy to spot, so forces around the United Kingdom realized they have to be sneaky. They decided to focus on their targets from above, because who looks into the sky when driving on the road, right? So one police force in Stoke-on-Trent thought carefully about how they could implement such a plan, and decided to use an unmarked lorry to spy from. Driving alongside cars, they could easily peer down into neighboring vehicles to see if the unsuspecting driver was using their phone. The plan worked, and the police force dealt with more than 150 drivers in the first day alone. We're yet to find out if the scheme is still in progress, but it might make you think twice if you drive while on the phone. Pulling you over to say thanks. We all know the fear of driving along and seeing a police car pull into the lane behind you. Even if you're a completely perfect driver who always abides by the law, your heart will start to skip a few beats, and you'll make sure you never cross the speed limit by even one figure. Now, imagine the fear if the car behind you suddenly starts flashing its lights. You start to realize that the only person they could be pointing at is you, and you're wondering just what you've done wrong. You'd start panicking as to whether your brake lights are working, if all your tires are properly pumped up, or if you've accidentally missed something crucial on your car. Perhaps you accidentally just ran a red light. Well, you can stop worrying, because sometimes police officers will pull people over just to say thanks. Nope, we're not messing with you here. It's controversial and a lot of people think it's unconstitutional, but it has been seen before when an officer has pulled over a driver to simply compliment them on their good driving. You've probably seen one of the viral videos where police officers will offer ice cream or dollar bills to extra good drivers, but it's technically illegal. However, you'll rarely see the media publishing the videos where someone is unhappy with being offered free goodies. They might already know you. Police officers in the United Kingdom focus a lot on community knowledge when it comes to tackling crime. They've come to the conclusion that a lot of people commit crimes because of underlying problems, and that the best way to solve this is by getting to know the person first. We're not suggesting the officer sit down with a cup of coffee and gets to know their entire background history, but being aware of any mental health problems or recent issues has gone a long way to ensure the best result for those consistently getting into trouble. One of the ways they've helped this to progress is by introducing a new type of officer called a community support officer. They've been common across England for around 10 years now, but it's still a foreign concept to many other countries. The role was primarily introduced to encourage cohesion between local residents and the police force. It seems to have worked to give citizens a new level of trust towards law enforcers. Those who take on the role have a duty to get to know those struggling in their local community. And then, if they do get into legal trouble, the officer can judge the best way to help them out. Now that you watched this video, we bet you're never going to look at police officers the same way if they've got a Hello Kitty armband on or something similar. We hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to subscribe to the Hub so you can watch all of our other great videos too. Thanks, and see you next time!